Study Session 6, Democracy. Introduction. All over the world, every tribe and race yearn for justice, liberty, equality, and fundamental rights. Democracy has been the major ground on which those conditions or virtues can be easily attained. Even though it is not every state of the world that practices democracy, some governments that practice parts of democratic features equally claim to be democratic. Democracy, as it is being practiced in the United States of America, which symbolizes a perfect democracy, equally lacks some basic tenets of democracy. We will therefore explore the concept of democracy in this study session in a bid to clear the misconceptions surrounding it. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to discuss what the practices of democracy entails in a state, explain the components of democracy, point out how democracy is practiced in contemporary time, discuss the importance of democracy, and explain the factors that promote democratic principles in any state. Meaning of democracy. The most widely known definition of democracy is the one articulated by the former American president, Abraham Lincoln. He described democracy as government by the people, of the people, and for the people. Do you agree with this position? Identify 5 authors, literatures, or academic resource that buttress your points, and post your response on Study Session 6 forum page on course website. Elements of democracy. The 2 elements of democracy are A. Liberty and B. Equality. Liberty connotes the opportunity to choose or participate in choosing, while equality connotes that the choice of a citizen or his opportunity to choose is as good as that of any other person. These 2 elements are the assumptions of democracy. That is, it is assumed that democracy that is practiced must encourage liberty and equality. However, these assumptions have been subjected to various criticisms. Schumpeter, for example, argued that liberty and equality are not necessarily part of democracy, and that in all democratic systems, there are necessary limitations with respect to the qualification and circumstances of voters. And as for equality, Schumpeter argued that the relationship between the voter and the candidate is that slightly more affluent people in the society are more able to make claims, either directly or indirectly. Types of democracy. The 2 major types of democracy are A. Direct and B. Indirect democracy. Direct democracy. This is the government formed through the general consent of everybody living in that society. The historical location where this form of government took place was in the Greek city-state of Athens. Here, everybody, young and old, female and male, gathered together to take decisions. This was made possible because of their population, which was not too large at the time. But despite this, some people such as slaves were exempted. Indirect democracy. This is the government formed through the people's representatives. In fact, this form of democracy is the most common today. The representatives are elected by the electorate, that is, people that vote, to take decisions on behalf of the larger populace. In Nigeria, We practice indirect democracy because we often elect representatives either to the national or state houses of assembly to make laws on our behalf. Practice of democracy in modern times. Democracy, which has been described as government through the consent of the people, has some limitations. For instance, due to the large number of people in the system, everybody cannot participate in taking decisions. This section will therefore explore an alternative form of democracy, that is, representative democracy. Democracy today, either in a one-party or in a multi-party system, involves the delegation of powers to consenting individuals by the majority, essentially through the process of election. The representatives elected by the voters are supposed to serve the interests of the voters. This makes the government to be described as a trust, with the elected and the representatives as trustees and the voters as trustors. That is the explanation of liberal theorists represented by John Locke and J.S. Mill. The major challenge of representative democracy is that the representatives sometimes develop ideas and interests which are not necessarily compatible with that of those who vote for them. In fact, the tendency is that the longer a representative serves, the more the likelihood of his deviation from the direction preferred by his electors. That means the representatives may use his superior knowledge of government to define for the people what their interests should be, rather than the people determining for the representatives what interests he should pursue or promote. It is worthy of note to state here that a representative is different from a delegate. A delegate is empowered by the higher power to carry out certain specified duties. The representative, in another sense, is elected for a specific period of time to serve his own people. Another major problem with the representative democracy is the interference of political parties and associations, that is, pressure groups. Either in the one-party or multi-party systems, political parties and pressure groups have become instruments for aggregating opinion. They equally mobilize the people for participation in the affairs of the state. The influence of these groups has limited the ability of people to express their interests, as well as their ability to participate directly in the governance of the state. Justification for democracy. Let us examine some of the reasons why many citizens and governments of the world prefer democracy to other forms of government. The reasons include the following. 1. It helps to safeguard the fundamental human rights. 2. It leads to the emergence of political parties which create the avenue for majority rule. 3. The election that is periodically conducted to elect representatives gives the people power of choice. 4. The existence of political parties in a democratic setting makes the changing of government less cumbersome. And 5. Because of the power of choice in democracy, it promotes equality of all citizens. Factors that promote democracy. 1. The supremacy of the Constitution. For democracy to be promoted in the country, the Constitution, which embodies all the laws, rules, and principles that guide the general conduct of the citizens and the government, must be supreme. That means everybody in the state must be subjected to the laws in the Constitution. There should be nobody that will be above the law of the land. The law must be the all in all of the land and must be seen to take effect on all and sundry. 2. Rule of law. In every organized society where democracy is practiced, rule of law is being followed. This is a principle where the law is made to take its course both on the poor and the rich. Nobody is made to be exempted from the actions of the state laws, for there is what is called equality before the law. 3. Separation of powers. Separation of power takes effect when the three arms of government, that is, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, function separately, though for the common good of all citizens. When this is obtainable in government administration, one arm therefore tends to serve as check or watchdog to another arm of government. This way, people are not denied of their rights and privileges. Democracy is therefore encouraged in this circumstance. 4. Existence of many political parties. Democracy is about the choice of the common good for the majority of the people. That is why the existence of many political parties will further enhance the choice of people in a political setting. The existence of many political parties will promote democracy in the country. 5. Periodic election. Democracy will further be promoted in the country when elections are conducted periodically to change government in a smooth manner. This way, tyranny and despotism is discouraged in government. 6. Independent Electoral Commission. An umpire that will monitor the conduct of a free and fair election must not be under the control or influence of any governmental administration. When this is done, the people or the electorates are encouraged to trust and depend on the activities of the Electoral Commission. This will further promote democracy. 7. Independence of judiciary. The body that interprets the laws should be given free hand to operate without any interference from both the executive and legislature. The judiciary is vested with the responsibility of interpreting the laws of the country. When this body is given a free hand to operate without any interference from both the executive and legislature, democracy is more protected and promoted. Study session summary. In this study session, you learned that in spite of limitations that surround democracy, it is still the most rational form of government. It is the form of government that gives the same opportunity to everybody in the state. That is why it is regarded as the government through the general consent of the people. The two major types of democracy are direct and indirect democracy. The most feasible way of attaining democracy in modern times is through representative democracy. However, there are some limitations which may reduce the ability of the electorate to control their representatives. Political parties, pressure groups, and mass media are some of the instruments that limit the interest and ability to participate directly in the governance by the people. Every practiced democracy is expected to exhibit equality and liberty. End of study session 6. Thanks for listening.